Hey everyone, and welcome to another review. I'm so glad you came by. The book I'm going to share with you today is called The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks. Mr. Banks is a Scottish author, and this is his first published novel. It came out in 1984. He really wanted to be a sci fi writer, but just kept getting rejection after rejection, so he decided to write this one as an easy way to get published. Okay. When I realized that he was a Scottish author, I could not stop doing a really bad Scottish accent in my head as I was reading the book. The same thing that I did when I read Irvine Welsh's works while I was in college, except Welsh would actually spell the words, not always, but in a lot of cases, as they would be pronounced in Scottish, though, which made it substantially harder. Here's an example. Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Banks, for at least not doing that to me. Where do I even start with this one? A teenage boy lives with his dad on a small island in Scotland. His older brother has been committed to a mental institution for reasons unknown at first. We do quickly find out, though, that not only has he escaped from that mental institution, but that he was ultimately committed in the first place after burning a bunch of dogs alive. That's enough. Say no more. But he was also caught terrorizing the children in the town by force feeding them worms and maggots. Well, it turns out that he did all of those things, allegedly, because he had a severe psychotic break while witnessing something terrifying while he was working. And I am absolutely not going to share what that was here, my good God. So we also learn how psychotic our protagonist Frank is. Honestly, he's worse. He kills animals and puts their heads on poles. Again, we already know, bad enough, but he also creates devices that trap living animals and force them into unimaginable deaths. I promise I will not be sharing what those details are, but they are depraved, to say the literal least. I do feel pretty damn sure that this behavior stems from Frank's disability, as he calls it, and I don't think I'm going to share what that disability is either. Screw it. He has to sit down to pee now. That's his disability. You know? How in the world do I keep finding these books? Anyway, the boy's father seems to know what his sons do and have done in the past, but he doesn't seem to do anything about it, and there's no mother in the picture anymore, and we do find out quickly after this why. But I will say that one of Frank's most terrifying lines from the beginning of the novel is, "Looking at me, you'd never guess I'd killed 3 people." And that's just the beginning. Like, this kid is an absolute psychopath. I thought the shit I read in Wake Up and Open Your Eyes was bad. That was a 10. This is 1,000. Let me please tell you a couple more gems from Frank, from the book, and I quote, "My greatest enemies are women and the sea. These things I hate. Women because they are weak and stupid and live in the shadow of men and are nothing compared to them. Blah, 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 blah." Gosh, what a winner this guy is. What a sack of buttholes. Another one of his gems is, "I killed little Esmeralda," his cousin, "because I felt I owed it to myself and the world in general. I had, after all, accounted for 2 male children and thus done womankind something of a statistical favor. If I really had the courage of my convictions, I reasoned, I ought to redress the balance, at least slightly. My cousin was simply the easiest and most obvious target. Again, I bore her no personal ill will. I'm sorry, what? I hate you so much. But he further justifies himself, saying, in a whole range of ways like that, I tried to keep balanced, though I have no idea why. It's something that must be done. And in the same way, I had to get rid of some woman, tip the scales back in the other direction. Okay, Thanos. Throughout the book, he tells us so many mundane and specific details about what he does each day, including how he showers and picks out his clothes, that I really do think he has some kind of compulsive disorder or psychosis. He clearly cares about exactly one thing, and it's not any human being, it's just control. And I swear he has no single redeeming quality. Not one, not half of one, not a whisper of one. And I cannot think of any other character I have ever hated as much as I hate Frank. And I've read the Twilight series, so I sure as hell hope that Banks did that on purpose and doesn't actually think that Frank is a neato character. He kind of reminds me of Patrick Bateman from American Psycho, but poor and Scottish and without a ding-dong. He goes on tirades about weapons and how he wishes he'd been American because of how easy it is to access guns. I mean, you're not wrong on that. But he rants about the people he hates and the one friend he actually has, called Jamie the Dwarf. He has no respect for his father or women, clearly. He's racist and impulsive, aware of his actions, but ambivalent to their disastrous consequences. He even says at one point, reminiscing about his mother, that he hated her so much he hoped she was dead. He says some other things that are even worse than that, but I will spare you. I always try to do some kind of research when I'm reading a book, even for my own pleasure, whether it be about the author or the novel itself, anything that gives me context that can maybe bridge some gaps or like give me something more while I'm reading. So I read an article that the author himself wrote about the book where he ultimately said it was supposed to be a pro-feminist, anti-militarist work satirizing religion and commenting on the way we're shaped by our surroundings and upbringing and the usually skewed information we are presented with by those in power. I'm sorry, what? Pro-feminist, you say? Have you read your book? My recommendation for the Wasp Factory is burn it. Burn it to the ground, phoenix that shit back up, and burn it again. I knew how I was going to feel about this book like a quarter of the way through it, if I'm being honest. Frank shows us who he really is pretty much immediately, and I remember saying as I was reading things like, Jesus Christ, and what the fuck, and you're the worst human being in the world. And the ending was almost the worst part for me, and I wish I could tell you why. It changed everything I thought I knew about what was happening, and it came out of literally nowhere. And as much as I hated the book, I do have to say that I hate reading something more than just coasting through it and feeling nothing at all. Please do not get me wrong. I absolutely do not recommend anybody read this book. Do not buy it. Stop it right now. Don't Google it. Don't give any money to Amazon or Abe Books. Don't go directly to the... Nothing. Don't. But I will say that I appreciate that I didn't feel like I wasted my time, because it actually did make me feel something, even if it was disdain and vitriol. And part of my feeling, my appreciation, is equally for the author, because he writes so beautifully. I'm so mad that he did not choose to use that skill for good.
What in the absolute cinnamon toast fuck are you doing?
I hate that book.